1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 2, we give thanks to God always for all of you, constantly mentioning you in our prayers. Something that Lacey and I have gotten to do recently is take a trip. We're here in Tennessee right now, and we will be back, Lord willing, next week. But it got me thinking about 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 2. We give thanks to God always for all of you, constantly mentioning you in our prayers. We've had some good road time. We've had some good air time flying here. And it's something that we can think about with giving thanks for all of you. We do miss our Northeast family while we're here. And there is a whole lot we can give thanks for. But I think what Paul says in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1, verse 2 and following really does make a lot of sense. Remembering before our God and Father your work of faith, labor of love, and steadfastness of hope in our Lord Jesus Christ. What does it mean to have a work of faith, a labor of love, and a steadfastness of hope? As you read through Thessalonians, he actually makes it clear before the end of the chapter. He would say in verse 8 that others, for they themselves, other people report concerning us the kind of reception we had among you, and how you turned to God from idols. You had a work of faith. You turned to God from idols. You know, a lot of people in the first century and a lot of people today worship and serve the creation rather than the Creator. Romans chapter 1 talks about that. How you'll have darkened reasoning, praising God for all the beautiful, wonderful things that we have here. Absolutely. But praising those wonderful things we have here instead of God, so many people focus on that. It is a work of faith to turn to God from idols. He says, work of faith and a labor of love. Again, in verse 8, they themselves report concerning us the kind of reception we had among you, and how you turned to God from idols to serve the living and true God. It is a labor of love, isn't it? To be able to serve God in a way that encourages others, in a way that is helpful. In fact, when you look at 2 Thessalonians, Paul is going to praise these brethren again in verse 3 of chapter 1 of 2 Thessalonians. We ought always to give thanks to God for you, brothers, as is right, because your faith is growing abundantly, and the love of every one of you for one another is increasing. Therefore, we ourselves boast about you in the churches of God for your steadfastness and faith in all your persecutions and in the afflictions that you are enduring. In all of the struggles that these brethren are going through, they had a work of faith. They turned from idols to serve the true and living God. They had a labor of love where they were serving God out of love by serving one another in love. And the text back in 1 Thessalonians chapter 1 and verse 9, to serve the living and true God, and verse 10, and to wait for his Son from heaven, whom he raised from the dead, Jesus, who delivers us from the wrath to come. They had a work of faith, a labor of love, and a steadfastness of hope. They were waiting for Jesus to return. In fact, if you read the rest of 1 Thessalonians especially, that is an emphasis that Paul is going to have. So at the end of chapter 1, again in verse 10, to wait for his Son from heaven. There is an emphasis on the hope that we have that Jesus is going to return. At the end of chapter 2, you have this emphasis in verse 17. But since we were torn away from you, brothers, for a short time, in person, not in heart, we endeavored the more eagerly and with great desire to see you face to face, because we wanted to come to you. I, Paul, again and again, but Satan hindered us. For what is our hope, or joy, or crown of boasting before our Lord Jesus at his coming? Is it not you? For you are our glory and joy. At the end of chapter 1, you have this hope of Jesus returning. At the end of chapter 2, you have this hope of Jesus returning. At the end of chapter 3, you have another hope in verse 11. Now may our Lord, our God and Father himself, and our Lord Jesus direct our way to you. And may the Lord make you increase and abound in love for one another and for all, as we do for you, so that he may establish your hearts blameless in holiness before our God and Father at the coming of our Lord Jesus with all his saints. Perhaps in chapter 4, you see the biggest part of the hope that they have, beginning in verse 13. We do not want you to be uninformed, brothers, about those who are asleep, those who've passed away, that you may not grieve as others who have no hope. For since we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so, through Jesus, God will bring with him those who have fallen asleep. There's a hope that he's going to return. And at the end of chapter 5, in verse 23, now may the God of peace himself sanctify you completely, and may your whole spirit and soul and body be kept blameless at the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ. These brethren in Thessalonica had a steadfastness of hope that Jesus was going to return, a work of faith in turning to God from dead idols, a labor of love in serving and caring for one another and loving God in a way that shows action, and an understanding, a hope that Jesus will one day return. These are the kinds of things that were really enjoyable to pray about and to continue to pray about as we think about all of you, our church family. Please have a blessed afternoon. Take care.
If you would like more information, or if you'd like to participate in our Bible studies and worship services, we would love to have you come join us at the Northeast Church of Christ in Albuquerque, New Mexico.